So, Mangala Charan, auspiciousness, prayer, blessing is objective. We say namaste. So either we are equal or one is higher, and then we pay respect. There are three elements. But one thing is clear that we have a duality. You are there, I am here. So that includes prayer, blessing, grace. You help me, I help you. Or no, no, you are at a higher level, so you should help me. So when that duality exists, our thinking, speaking, and action are always there. But when it is subjective, that everything is consciousness. Consciousness alone is the absolute truth. We start from there. At present, I don't know, but by the journey I reach there that we all are one reality, one consciousness. That is one approach. But the mind is obsessed with objective reality. It does the same thing again. For example, I'll have $1 million, I'll be happy. So once I have $1 million, the mind has already jumped to some other desire. So the objective reality, we know it is going to happen, and still we are running after the objective reality. The mind picks up the object or a person. I will marry Miss Universe, I'll be happy. I married it, but then there is again a problem. Oh, you are my soulmate. No object contains the quality of happiness. No object. Or it gives me happiness at one time, it makes me unhappy at other time, in other location, in other situation. Even after understanding this, the mind does not listen to us. The mind goes back. It forgets. What it forgets? The goal of life. And it keeps on running, running, and running. That running causes lot of actions. So the master says, why don't we understand that I want permanent happiness? I want an end of suffering. So why I do not understand anything that changes cannot give me permanent happiness. And the world itself is a change. But I don't understand. I understand and I don't understand. The problem is this: I understand and I do not understand. Any object, any person, any situation. So from there, the master says that real self is not changing. Put the mind in searching that entity, that existence which does not change. And you see, So what we are doing by discussion, again, thinking has two aspects. I want to put one is that you sit alone and you are thinking inside. And then we speak out. So when we speak out, we discuss. So both are thinking. One is internal thinking and other is external thinking. So internal thinking and external thinking both follow a path of analysis. We are doing manan. We are doing manan. That is what the contemplation and reflection is. But there is a catch in it. I want to prove that I am right, you are wrong. That is not a manan. That is not a contemplation and reflection. So when you raise questions, you raise doubt, you are ready to understand. Who raises the doubt? A seeker. That is what this master and a disciple tradition is. It's a two-way communication. In school and colleges and university, it's only one-way communication. Professor says, here is the tool, technology, I have made you understand. Here is a book, read it and pass the examination. Don't ask me unnecessary questions. And this is also happening in America. I'm so surprised. So just a thinking. So the master says that we are giving you some thoughts that this existence is absolute existence, consciousness, and bliss. Tell me any object which contains consciousness who can recognize that they are of the nature of permanent happiness. No object is there. So the real self is definitely different from all the objects of the world. Because I take you as an object, you take me as an object. Whether you brand me as a teacher or a student or a husband or a wife, whatever it is still an objective reality. So why we do namaste? So that our mind becomes little subtle. It should drop the objective reality. That is the only goal. That ego should not take over with the objective reality. So that intellect should become the subtler and subtler so that it can drop the intellect. It can drop the ego to give place to the real self or the pure consciousness. And that is why we are contemplating and reflecting on the real self. When I say I am the real self, when I say I am Michael, I am Girish, I understand. The mind agrees with it. But when the mind says I am the real self, where is the real self? Can you show me? So what is to be shown is an objective reality. So mind, where are you going? First, let me make you pure, clear. So that purity is something that I should have a clarity in the intellect. I'm aware of the knowledge. I'm aware of the wisdom. So this master started the journey. He says, I am the real self, means I am the supreme consciousness. There is no difference between the supreme consciousness and the God as such. First, you start the journey from the binary format. Why binary format? Again, apply the thinking. What is that binary format? that I am consciousness, the rest is matter. Binary format. So I do not think what the matter consists of. It consists of atom, and then atom, electron, proton, and neutron, and then the energy, all are matter. We are saying binary format. One is matter and other is consciousness. We are saying consciousness is real, matter is unreal. Why it is unreal? Because anything that changes has to be unreal. Anything that is changes must have a cause, and that cause contains an element of the change. So body, that is where the master have discovered the three bodies, the panch kosha, the five koshas, the three states of the mind, the waking, sleeping, and dream, and still we are different from it. So that is why we are covering this Mangala Charan in different topics. So when we do the contemplation and reflection over a length of time, we are constantly contemplating and reflecting. It means we are moving constantly into the state of mindfulness during the day while doing all of our activities, so that the mind becomes qualified, and that contemplation and reflection helps us to reach there. Now see, I am the real self. Who is claiming? I. What it is claiming? I. I am real self. Who is claiming? I. And what it is claiming? I. I claim I am real self. So we are making the intellect subtle by thinking in this way. So the moment this mind becomes subtle, it becomes pure. It becomes qualified. So I claim I am real self. Who is the real self? The one who claims. Both are one. But the mind has been understanding, getting the knowledge of any object when that object is in front of the mind or separate. How the mind knows this mouse? The moment I say, this is mouse, so thought plus consciousness pervaded the entire mouse. I'm conscious of a thought. First, that thought pervaded, thought consciousness, thought pervasion, thought pervading. I know you. So the moment I say I know you, that thought pervaded you entirely as an object. And then the reflected consciousness in the mind becomes conscious. So if I don't become conscious of this thought that I know you, I don't know you. Two things, plus an object. So thought consciousness, one, reflected consciousness, two, and the object. Any object. You have a thought, lane number one, unwanted, unwelcome thoughts, they come and go, and but if you are not aware of it, you don't know your mind is wandering or not. I have to be conscious. And we know that more than 50,000 thoughts enters into the mind of an adult educated person every day, of which we are hardly aware of few selective thoughts. So that proves reflected consciousness. If it is not conscious of a thought, I don't know whether my mind is wandering or not. There may be many thoughts going on. Sometimes what happens, you are busy in doing something and suddenly you stand up and go to the kitchen and grab a glass of water. Do you see that? You don't know. Oh, then you realize, oh, yeah, okay, yes, I had a thought an hour ago to take a glass of water, of which you were conscious, and then you were busy in something else. You forget that thought, and ultimately, so the thought pervasion. So there are two things: the thought pervasion and reflected consciousness pervading. Pervasion means permeating. Oh, it's a chemistry and physics. Permeates. It enters means the water permeates the wave. That is the function. That is how the mind acquires the knowledge. That is how our mental consciousness, the moment I use the word mental consciousness, it means mind with the consciousness, mental consciousness. So the conscious mind is also the same thing. I recognize a thought and then I am conscious of that thought. Thought is the product of, thought is equal to reflected consciousness plus an object. There cannot be any thought without an object. They are going slowly. So, what should we do then? We should understand the process of knowledge that is taking place in the mind. Computer screen is an object plus thought of an object that I am talking to you, but I am conscious of both, and that is how I know it. So when I say I am conscious of that, it is the mind. The I thought is conscious of this. The mind does not have a consciousness, so we say it is a reflected consciousness. So how the consciousness reflected from where? Mind is the medium. Mind is the medium. When the mind is not conscious of it, in deep sleep, we don't know anything. That proves our understanding. In deep sleep, the mind is a medium where the consciousness is not reflected. So there is no object. So I don't become conscious of anything, including my body, or the mind, or the thought, or the pain, or the sorrow, or the pleasure. Do you see that? Do you see? We have
Yes.
to constantly think and reflect and then say, oh, yes, it is right, it is right. So the master gives another example. You cannot see the sun in the afternoon directly, but you can see the sun indirectly by the moonlight. Moonlight is nothing but the sunlight.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful logic. Yes, we can see the moonlight, definitely. So it is the moonlight by which we know the world. So, so why the master says that Intellect, intellect cannot see the real self. The moonlight cannot see the sun. Moonlight cannot see the sun. Another proof that anything that I know, I am conscious of that object, that person, that situation, that time, that event, that sorrow, that pain, that frustration, anything. If I'm not conscious of the stress, how can I know that I'm stressed? But here the mind plays a role, or you can say here the ego plays a role. It does not see who is saying I am stressed is the same person who is experiencing the stress. It is the same I. One I becomes objective, other I becomes subject. And that is how we say mind is the cause of all the suffering, and mind is the cause of all. Now see, I know you. So that I thought pervaded into this body, breath, mind, intellect as an entity. Then I say I know you. The same I thought, the same mind divided itself and pervaded in an object which is you too. And then I say I am conscious, the same I which is only nothing but the reflected consciousness. That is how the mind divides into three: I, you, and the knowledge. I, mouse, and the knowledge. This is how the mind works. The moment we recognize at present the mind is playing with us and we start playing with the mind is purified. J. Krishnamurti says it is choiceless awareness. So there is no choice of the I thought, there is no choice of you thought, there is no choice of the knowledge knowing. So what happens? I live in choiceless awareness even when I am talking to you, even when I am thinking about you. There is everything that awareness is behind the division of this knower, known, and the knowing, and I am there. That is what the Master says, you have purified the mind. So, what is the way to know that? That is where the Master approaches. Are you still aware of the binary format? Is the mind is saturated with that knowledge? There are only two things in the world. Whatever the mind knows, whatever the mind is, it is all about matter in the material world where you cannot find the real self. It is consciousness. Self inquiry is the way. Self inquiry involves thinking, contemplation, but thinking in line with the principles of Eastern wisdom, not thinking in lines with the principles of physics or chemistry or biology, because you land up in the matter. You cannot find your real self in the energy, in electron, proton, and neutron, in atom, in the body, in the physiological, in the physiology, in the biology. That is why we say follow the Eastern wisdom. Once you found the real self, drop everything. You don't need any principle. Everything becomes clear. We should know the ignorance. So the moment I recognize that I'm living in ignorance, ignorance is rejected as the real self. Knowledge is realized. And that is why we have the three steps. I don't know, let me know it. You are the highest level of a seeker. You recognize, yes, I'm the real self. That is what is known as awakening. Good. So that is what. But I do not understand. The moment your mind says, I do not understand, let me understand. Majority of the seekers live in this level of middle level of a seeker. Majority, 99%, when they start the journey. I don't understand, let me understand. So the dialogue between the teacher and the student starts. So internal thinking and the external thinking means the discussion and the manan. So I can do the manan together or I can do the manan by myself. So literal translation of thinking is known as vichar. Vichar is a Sanskrit word which simply means thinking. But now we are very clear. I have understood the principle. What is that principle? Again, make it very clear. Principle says you are thinking about who am I, what is the world, and what is the existence. You are not thinking what is the matter. So you are supporting the binary format. Who am I? What is the existence and what is the word? So what is the word is false self because word is material word. No, I love you so much. I have been loving you. You are my soulmate. How long that soulmate? As long as you express by a thought. After that you are busy, your soulmate is busy. Or we marry to be happy, we divorce to be happy. So I'm keeping that thinking pattern in my mind because when I'm thinking, I'm doing it consciously. So the consciousness behind that thinking one day will make your mind silent. I got it. Eureka, like Archimedes. I got it. Because the mind has been so much obsessed with the objective reality, the objectification of the world and creating a division, always running for peace and happiness, love and wisdom outside, even if it knows that there is no peace and happiness outside, that very running causes the impurity. It acts like a wave, and we take the wave as a separate entity than the water, and that is where the ignorance takes over us. So that is why we are understanding the process of knowledge that is taking place in the mind. I know a mouse, so the mouse is an object plus thought of a mouse plus reflected consciousness. Reflected consciousness means I am conscious of the mouse. So what then the knowledge of the mouse is there. So apply these three factors in knowing anything of the world outside. That is how we know anything. Or I may say, what is this? I don't know this object. So this object plus the statement A statement about this object plus reflected consciousness. I don't know this object. Whether I know, I don't know. So that poses the problem. That is why the master says the unqualified intellect cannot know the real self. You are already you are already creating a confusion. This is an object. So what I don't know the name and the form. You are talking still of the inertness, the matter. I don't know. So what I don't know an object. No, I want to know who am I. Bring the mind back. Contemplation and reflection. Contemplation and reflection. Now go a little
But
deeper. Yes.
reflected consciousness is I thought. If
Reflected consciousness is just a consciousness being reflected as a moonlight. So when I say
yeah,
I know the mouse, here I intellect or the I thought, the ego, supported by the consciousness, uses I. Two things. One is the mind, medium, then this mind functions as the ego. But the moment I say ego, the I thought is also consciousness. So one reflection is I consciousness, other reflection is simply the reflected consciousness. To tell you clearly, mirror is there, sunlight falls on it, so that is the mind. But it is being reflected in the mind, so I thought is there. And where it is reflected on the wall. So whatever is being reflected upon, it may reflect on the wall, it may reflect on the picture, it may reflect on the world outside. So that works as being conscious of. And I consciousness, I thought. Make it again very clear. How we get the knowledge of the mouse? It is done by the two factors. From the mind, thought goes out and envelops the mouse. Very important point. You have to apply this in during contemplation. Two factors. First, the mind, from the mind, the thought. Thought goes out and pervades the mouse. That removes the ignorance. Done. It is a thought pervasion. But unless I become conscious of this, I don't know it is mouse or something else. Mouse is an object, thought pervades it. Ignorance is removed, removes the veil, but the mind and the thought are the matter. Mind and the thought are matter. So reflected consciousness now pervades the mouse also. Thought pervades, being conscious, thought consciousness pervades, and then the reflected consciousness pervades, reflected in the mind, moonlight from the sunlight. That is why I used an example. Now it is just conscious of it. So it is conscious not only of the mouse but also the thought. So I know the mouse.
yeah, but I need knowledge of mouse only because I am. I am is reflected consciousness,
I
and
am so.
consciousness can exist without any I and without any I am.
Yes, you're right.
So it possible to live without any reflected consciousness.
Yes, Because that I-ness or the intellect or the expression of the thought is all about the mind. But at the same time, the consciousness is independent of it. But I have already expressed the I thought, so it has to work through the reflected consciousness. So now reflected consciousness is nothing but the mind with the thought. Mind,
But
yeah.
consciousness everywhere.
But here we are,
So,
I thought one reflection, specific.
but distance between mouse and you, it's only the mind.
It is only the mind. That is what we are understanding. That is,
Mind,
we are
mind
understanding.
starting from the I thoughts. I am.
We are understanding the process of knowledge that is taking place in the mind. You are right. Process of knowledge taking place in the mind. How I know the mouse. So when I create a thought, I know this is mouse. So this is purely a thought. So this thought comes from the I-ness, or you can say mind or intellect, they interchange their function. So I thought. So the moment I thought, that I thought also contains a consciousness. I thought. This is mouse.
But consciousness pervading everywhere, and consciousness is everywhere. And so,
But it is
if you
limited
see,
by the mind. That is why it is reflected consciousness. That is why it knows the mouse at one time. That is why it knows the wall at second time. It is limited by the reflected consciousness all the time. It is
but
pervading. Why it is
in
limited?
this,
That limitation is ignorance.
yes, the reflected consciousness and I thoughts, it's impurity
It
of
is
the mind.
impurity and it is limitation, and that limitation creates a knowledge of the world outside, that you are different from me. It causes the duality. I have to drop that duality. But we are understanding. Now we are understanding in a different how to drop that duality.
Drop I, drop reflected consciousness.
No, so here the self inquiry. Yes, that is one way to say it. Now I have to see that I say this is mouse and I say this is real self. Now follow the same equation, mathematical equation. This is real self. So real self is an object for the mind plus a thought, not just for a while. If based on the thought, the real self plus a thought about the real self, now plus reflected consciousness. The moment I say reflected consciousness, it does not work, because the real self, if it is an object, it is already consciousness. So I don't need any reflected consciousness. So now the
Yeah,
moment I say this is real self plus real self are not two, they are one. I enter into unlimited infinite consciousness.
yeah,
So I first think that I don't need reflected consciousness to know the real self. But the moment I express this is real self, so I am aware of this thought coming from the I thought, and behind it, there is already a real self. I have recognized it. Why I am not able to recognize it? The mind starts working. That is what we say: ignorance, impurity, restlessness of the mind. That is why we say you have to Your mind should be totally absorbed. Or Buddha says there should be total emptiness. Why emptiness? Because there is no objectless state. Patanjali says the same thing. But can it happen that I make the mind totally emptiness? Because I am thinking about it. The more I think about it, I am creating a thought. So it can never become an empty. Return again. Return again to the same thing. What about knowing the real self? Moonlight cannot say, I know the sun, if I use that. So, knowing is consciousness, knowing is present, knowing is consciousness. I know the sun by the moon means consciousness is the same. So, until the covering of the mind, the impurity of the mind, that ignorance of the mind, the stubbornness of the mind, which says, no, I know, should go away. We need only real self. So, it means the real self knows the real self by itself. No reflected consciousness is there. Real self is consciousness. Matter is inert, so reflected consciousness is required to know the material world. Normally, we say the mind is required to know the material world. Real self plus real self thought is about the knowledge of the real self. I am already awakened. So, J. Krishnamurti says it is a choiceless awareness. Or other master says, are you aware? Mind says, aware of what? Don't ask me. Are you aware? So aware is aware of awareness. If I say that's a wrong statement. But that will help us to understand the real self knows the real self by itself. The moment I say, are you aware? Aware of what? And that is how the mind creates an ignorance. I am real self, thought pervaded. Then the mind stops like a mirror. What happens then? The real self is known indirectly. That is what the master wants to prove it. Intellect cannot know the real self directly. It knows the real self indirectly. Are you in your room? Yes, I know the space indirectly present in the room. 100% clear, clarity. Are you in your house? Yes. House means the space. House means the space. Are you drinking water? Yes. I am real self. Again, I'm repeating. You have to listen to it again and again. I am real self. Thought pervasion. Now, I need a consciousness to know the real self. Real self is already consciousness. So, reflected consciousness is gone. The moonlight is gone. So, I know the real self indirectly. Knowledge is sky revealed behind the blueness, like behind the mirage water in a desert. I know I don't say it's a water, I say it's a mirage water. It means I am already aware of the sand and the sun. Indirectly. Indirectly. But why it happens like this? Why the master is talking about this? Real self is self-luminous. What do you mean by this self-luminous? It has its own consciousness. It is of the nature of consciousness. Unlike the moon. Moon is the mind. We already understood that, in deep sleep, the mind is simply a matter. It doesn't know anything. But that consciousness, that real self, never sleeps, never wakes up, never dreams. It is awareness all pervading behind the mind. And that is what Shivoham is. I am Shiva. So you understood the two part. One happened bhag. In Sanskrit we say it is a bhag tyag lakshana. The mind recognizes the thought I am real self and negated it. Then mind comes down. It knows the real. The real self is already known. I know the mirage water. I know the moment I say mirage water, I know it is sand and sun. Water is not there. I negated it. So this principle is known as bhag tyag lakshanam. Do you mean? The moment you have expressed the thought, the very thought is negated along with the mind. What is left is pure consciousness. Real self knows by real self. Three factors: object, mouse, thought of an object plus reflected consciousness, knowledge of a mouse. Real self plus I am the real self. The thought about the real self is equal to I know the real self. The very thought expressed is negated. Now what is left is pure awareness. This is what J. Krishnamurti says, choiceless awareness. Where is the job of a seeker? To follow this principle, job of a seeker is to contemplate and think about the process of knowledge. What is the meaning of knowledge? Do you know the mouse? Yes, I know the mouse. Do you know the mouse? Yes, I know the mouse. What do you mean by it? I know, I'm conscious. So I plus consciousness, it's a reflected consciousness plus the I thought. Okay. Do you know the mouse, table, chair, body? Yes. We know every day millions of things. What time you woke up? Oh, I woke up at 5. I slept at 10. I ate this. Without knowledge, I cannot do anything. But still I'm doing everything. Just a minute, I think I will pick up. Kelly with call comfort app. To accept, press 1. Knowledge, process of knowledge. Three factors: thought pervasion, reflected consciousness pervades, means moonlight becomes conscious. That is why we say to know any object through the mind, we need an exclusive attention on that object. So the moment we are talking of exclusive attention, we have already limited the consciousness through the mind. The sun is now passing through the moonlight. Because we are knowing an object, we are not knowing the real self. So that is why we have to keep on contemplation and reflection. That three questions: who am I, what is the existence, and what is the world? So we should be very clear the role of intellect in knowing the real self. When, in what condition? So when the master says, I am real self, cannot be understood by the intellect because the intellect is always obsessed. It wants to know as if the real self is an object. Now this is real self. It wants to use itself as a reflected consciousness and claims that I know the real self. Not possible. Moonlight cannot know the sun. But at the same time, pay attention, this is going to be one of the most important principles. At the same time, I am real self, thought expressed, pervaded, negated. What is left is real self. So it is known as that this I thought is used for two things. Now, understanding that in different way. That I thought, body mind complex, ego, but that I becomes conscious of because of the consciousness.
Yes.
So I is also used for the real self. So you have to look I for used for the real self. Don't look I for being expressed as a thought, body, mind complex. Don't worry about it. Negate it. Come on, how to negate it? You already negate wave. It is all water. You negated mirage water. It is sand and the sunlight. You already negated blueness of the sky. Why can't you negate? So that is what we say the intellect knows the real self indirectly. I'm just what is left is pure awareness. What is left? Pure consciousness. What is left? Just an awareness. No worries. You may not be able to frame the question. So there are question and answer sessions. So this master created the question as if it comes from the seeker. And then he answers it. He doesn't leave any doubt. Again, I'm repeating. I am real self has two factors. One factor comes from the ego, the thought, intellect, and the mind
Yeah.
that says I'm the real self, which is nothing. That I is nothing but panch kosha, five kosha, three bodies together. A jiva that is known as individual consciousness, I consciousness, and the same I is also used for the real self, the pure consciousness. Because the mind is a matter, it is inert, it cannot express itself. So, one expression, moonlight says, I am sun, and then the sun is already there. Sun is already there, it is self evident. It is sunlight, it is not the moonlight. Still, we use now I am walking in a moonlight, I see the sunlight.
There is no moonlight. There is only sunlight.
There is only sunlight. But until this, we have to the way moonlight is compared with the mind when there is a full moon after 15 days of the dark night. Full moon means emptiness of the mind. So what is required? Viveka and Vairagya. To make it full moon. So this principle is known as Bhag Tyag Lakshana. Sanskrit word, so it's better I'm repeating it so that we will use this. Intellect separates what I am not. Even if I use I know you. See, it is the intellect which is expressing. Plus, with the help of the I know you, the intellect is already separated. So, why don't you separate this thought? You are doing it every day. You are doing it every occasion. Why can't you do this now? That when the intellect negates what I am not, it knows. The intellect knows this I am with the body mind complex is not what I am. Use a different word. Mirage water appears to exist, but it does not. Intellect knows this very well. Intellect knows this very well. You do whatever you want to do. The blueness of the sky appears to exist, but it does not. The wave appears to exist, but it is not. So, the same way, let the thought say, I know real self, so it is pointing somewhere. Very good. Is it pointing to the world outside? No. Negate it. So, what is left is the I know, I'm real self. What is very important. That is what the master says that we have to pay attention. The thought removes ignorance. Reflected consciousness gives me the knowledge of the world. Two things.
Yeah.
So, why not I should express the thought that I am the real self? Negate it, I am real self. Again, thought removes ignorance and reflected consciousness makes me conscious of the object in the thought. I'm saying it again. So I am real self. Reflected consciousness is not required to make me conscious of the real self because the real self is already consciousness. Why it is? That is why we use the word. It is self-evident. It is self-luminous. It is self-evident. Self-evident. It is independent. It does not need help of anything to know itself.
But it also means that we don't need any thoughts to
Know the real self.
conscious.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. But who is saying this?
Mind.
Why you are saying this when you don't need any? Did you get an answer? Why you are saying this? The moment you expressed it, so you expressed it from the thought that is like a mirage water. That is already created an individual consciousness. So it means what? It means what? You have used the intellect, and the intellect can work in the individual consciousness, and the individual consciousness is nothing but consciousness plus three bodies or five koshas. So that individual consciousness wants to know the real self. Why? Because that individual consciousness is living in ignorance. And that's where the of journey starts. That's where the sadhana starts.
But its individual consciousness want to see real self or know the real self, but also this individual consciousness is border between real self and real self.
Yes, it is like a border. In the words of Ramakrishna Paramhans, a big doll, wanted to know an ocean and she jumped into an ocean. What happened?
Big doll. What is doll?
Doll, a toy, salt toy made up of a salt,
Hmm.
jumped into an ocean because
Yes, it's
toy wanted to know what is an ocean. Same thing happens to the individual consciousness. And that is what, awakened. Not only many powers of the mind are revealed at that stage. So we will continue with the reflected consciousness a bit more before we go into the reflected consciousness. Just think of this, think of again and again. Thinking again, I made it very clear that this is the way we have to think. What is thinking? And so we will understand a little bit more on this thought, thought consciousness, reflected consciousness. Reflected consciousness gives me the result. What is the result? The knowledge.
But real self don't need any knowledge. Real self itself is knowledge.
Real self itself is the knowledge, but again we are talking of the individual consciousness. This has two pervasion, the thought pervasion and reflected consciousness pervasion. That's why I become conscious. The moment I say I know the mouse, I'm already conscious of it. I know the mouse thought, but behind it I'm conscious of it. If I'm not conscious of it, I cannot say that. So there are two I know the mouse, one eye, I'm conscious of it. Second eye is the real I. That is what happens in every. So this one removes the ignorance, but after removing the ignorance, what is left? Knowledge. I'm conscious of the knowledge. I'm conscious of the mouse. I'm conscious of the real self. Who is conscious? Thought expression, individual consciousness. It is gone. Real self knows by real self. And that is the highest